Hey guys, so it's time for well, this isn't exactly an art topic video, but it's not exactly a life video either. This is more so for like working on like story projects and here and there, because if you guys don't know, as well as being an artist, I also have my own stories, and I am a very avid reader, and I also very much enjoy storytelling in almost all mediums, video game, play, movie, TV show, music, audiobooks, books, the whole nine yards, comic books, all of it. Also, I would like to apologize for the heavy traffic in the background. Nothing I can do about that. It's finally cooling down, and my apartment gets really, really hot if it's closed in. So I have to apologize for the traffic ASMR in the background. I live in a city, so not much else I can do about that, but let's just get right into it. So, if you guys have been following me for a while, you know that originally, right around this time last year, I talked about like my yearly goals and everything because I like doing. I've always felt that my like year starts over in the fall, and I think it just has to do with the fact that going to school all the time, your new school year always started in the fall, and it was just like new year never really registered as new year to me. I usually don't realize it's the next year until like the middle of the year, which I know sounds crazy, but it's just how I've always been. And then when I started getting into more spiritual stuff, I realized that for a lot of spiritual religions and everything like that and beliefs, a lot of the new year starts right after the harvest, right after fall. So I was like, oh, it's just ironic, isn't it? But one of my biggest things that I really, really wanted to get done this year was I wanted to have Ticks and Turns, my steampunk vampire story, done and kickstarted right around this time. I really wanted to have that happen. It didn't end up happening. I did finish it. It is written out, and I'm currently working on typing it up on my days off, my few days off that I have. But the problem is, and this might sound, aggravating, but I don't make money from my stories. It's why I have things like my Patreon and why I have things, like my donations and stuff like that. And it's because currently my stories don't make any money, and when you're an adult and you have bills to pay and pets to feed and, existing, you got to make sure that you make that coin before you do fun stuff with your hobbies. And it's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, what if you work really hard and blah, 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 and then you can make money off of it? Well, that's great, and that does happen. It's very rare that happens, and usually you need to have some sort of secondary support system or income to have that happen. You know, most of the stories of the rags to riches were people who were, this isn't shade, so don't take it as that, but there were people who were like either living with someone who could support them, or they were on some kind of government assistance, or they were with someone who was very well successful, so they had time to work on these and do things like that. But there was always someone to pick up the slack, and that's just a fact of life, and I'm not one of those people. I work very, very hard. I'm also looking for a secondary other work too, because things getting pricey. But currently, my stuff and my hobbies don't make any money. Realistically, people could probably argue, well, you're an artist and a YouTuber, so technically your hobbies do make money. Well, I've been doing it as a job for many years now, so it's not exactly a hobby anymore. A hobby is like when I stream video games. That's very much a hobby. But that's a big issue here, and a lot of people always wonder, like, how do I make time? How do I blah, blah, blah? What do I... And the sad truth is, you have to make time. And sometimes you just can't. You just cannot make time for it. And that's what sort of happened to me, was I was on such a good roll with this. I got the logo done. I got, character designs, like, fleshed out. I didn't, like, technically post them, but I'm working on that now. I had lore bits done. I had the entire first book done. A little, tangent. Ticks and Turns is a one-off book, but there are more stories in that universe, and depending on how the Kickstarter goes with that, I might do other stories, but they won't focus on the main characters of this book. So it's not like... how I always saw Ticks and Turns for my thing was that it was sort of like an anthology sort of story, where like you don't have to read the first one to read the second one or the third one or whatever. Realistically, I only have like the second one mapped out as well, so if like anything were to come with that after that, it would have to come way later. But it's things like that where you don't have to, like, it'd be cool and you'll like catch little things here and there, but you don't need to do that. While as for my big project, my project Marked, that's not going to be done for many, many years because that is a multiple book series where you have to read all of them to understand how things are going. You probably could jump in at one point, but you would be missing a lot of nuances and a lot of things like that. But that's another thing. What I said right there and what I've learned, that's something I learned with a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of reading and a lot of understanding. And I always talk about how, if you want to do something right, you need to practice it. If you want to be a good writer, you need to read a lot of books. You need to read a lot of fan fiction. Surprise, surprise. There is some really good fan fiction out there. Yeah, there's also a lot of trashy ones, but the same thing can go for books. I've read a lot of bad books in my day, too, that have been published and are on the shelves. So it's always like give and take here. But you need to know what it is, and it's just like normal writing and adventure, in school. You have to, the example I always like using, it's a good thing with art, but you also get it with other things, and it's the fact that look at stuff that you used to do when you were in first grade. Or grade school if you're in other countries. I don't really know, and I know it's like grade school, primary school, and stuff like that. But look at that. Look at the stuff you did, just basic stuff, reading, writing, math, and look at where you are now. Pretty sure you've grown a lot since then, and that's because you've been practicing at it and working at it. And that's something you have to do with your hobbies. And how do you turn a long-term project into something like that? Well, the first thing you have to get in your head, and it is very hard and very demotivating, but you got to get in your head, you're probably not going to make money off of this. Realistically, again, I'm doing a Kickstarter because I do want to have physical books. But obviously, if my Kickstarter flops, which there is a possibility it could when it does come out eventually, that being said, I'm not holding my breath on those stories. I've wanted to tell these stories for a long time. Oh, well, why don't you just make it for free then? Well, it's still a lot of work going into it, but I do want to make it very affordable. It's something that I like seeing with a lot of other indie authors and indie people in general, even some of the big guys, they have options to where you can get their stories for a very, very fair price because there is still work put into it, and it's very reasonable and realistic to do it in such a way. So obviously, if my Kickstarter, when eventually it goes up, if it flops, I'll still have a digital version on Amazon that people can purchase and get. I'll still, when I eventually get the money, I'll probably self-print, books and sell them at cons and on my online store and stuff. But that being said, that's also a whole other price and a whole other point here, and that can be very demotivating for a lot of people. A lot of people I know in my personal life who are also, authors and artists, they just want to see the dollar signs. And realistically, yeah, we do. We want to get the money from it. We do want to get what we deserve. But hey, sometimes stuff's not everybody's cup of tea. I love urban fantasy and fantasy stories. I love supernatural stories. I love horror stories. I am not a big sci-fi fan. I can enjoy a sci-fi movie, but I don't consider myself a sci-fi fan. My husband very much is. But again, that's how it depends on other people. There are people out there who like things and don't like things. And I don't believe in the mentality of buying something you don't like just to support somebody. I know it sounds weird, but I would rather people who genuinely want to read my book and read my stories get it than people who are just like, yeah, I'm never going to touch it, but you know what? I want to support you. To me, it's I know that might sound weird because it's like either way you're getting paid, but it's not what I want. I want people to enjoy the stories that I've worked hard on, to enjoy the characters I've worked very hard on. And that's something else that comes with time. Something I've heard that a lot of people they seem to do this as like a negative thing, but to me it's rather ingenious. I've read a lot of fan fiction in my day. I wrote a lot of fan fiction in my day. I haven't written it in years. See, my grammar's already bad. This is why I have an editor, people. But when I hear people go on the lines like, oh, well, if you just change the names, now it's original. So what's wrong with that? I've read some fan fictions that are nothing like the source material, but they have the same characters in it. Realistically, if they just change the names, that is a 100% original story. Why is that being used as a negative here? It's not. It's a very good positive. Because some people, they need that crutch. And then when they're done, they can change the names. And there you go. You got something original. That's all your own. And another thing, too, is if you want to make fan fiction and fan stories and AUs and things like that for things you like, but it gets your foot in the door, then do it. I did a lot back in the day. I was such a big Narutard, and I talk about this openly. Well, I'm not anymore, and I haven't been for years. it's definitely something that stuck with me. You know, I wrote a lot of fan fiction. I made a lot of characters for it. And when I sit back and think of certain things, I'm like, I had potential here for really good original characters that I can easily just take out of the Naruto universe and put them into something else. I've done that. I did a video of that on my channel. And you can do that with a lot of other characters too, and a lot of other stories, and you see things like that. And I don't see that as a negative. If you've made something completely original on your own, but you used not original characters, and then you just change the titles and change certain character designs, well, there you go. You know, another good example here is that people seem to believe that, you know, I want to make something that's 100% original. It's so blah, blah, blah. It's not going to happen. I hate to break it to you. It's not going to happen. Every sort of story has been done. And that's something you need to get in your head. Because it took a long time for me to get that in your head. Again, I'll use my own thing. Ticks and Turns is a steampunk vampire story in an alternate universe America. I'm sure there are thousands of stories like that out there. I'm sure the plot lines I've come up with are probably out there. And I can't think of any at the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure they are. What makes books and stories stand out are the characters you create and the worlds you create around them, and you make them feel realistic, and you make people be able to relate and imprint onto those characters, you know? It's a big reason why a lot of people like Harry Potter, the Immortal Instruments, Stephen King books, you know, and I know there's a very, very vast genres here, but people are able to do that because they fall in love with the characters and the stories within them. But let's think about it realistically, right? Harry Potter, the Chosen One story. Lord of the Rings, the fantasy adventure. You know, the Mortal Instruments, the YA strong female protagonist thrust into a world she's not prepared for. Those sorts of stories are everywhere. They're everywhere. But what makes them stand out? It's the characters and the way it's written and the way that they imprint on us, on how the reader. It also has to do with where you are in the time of your life when you are reading it or writing it. That's another very important thing. You know, I once heard that, like, you know, your work is a time capsule of the time that it was created. And something interesting about sketchbooks, too, is, like, usually you'll remember memories attached to those things, even if they're silly little doodles. I have that to art, you know? There are many memories where I remember making things, and I remember the time and the feeling and how I felt doing it. Even if now I don't like how the artwork does. And that's how a lot of writing is as well. It needs to be something you genuinely enjoy doing and not something you're doing just for the dollar signs. You need to get in your head that, you know what, your hobby might not be monetizable. But if it's not monetizable, do you still enjoy doing it? Because if you still enjoy doing it, that's all that matters here. You know, you might not get it out to hundreds of thousands of people. But even if you get it out to a couple of people and they like it, isn't that just as well? Isn't that just as what's worth it? And I think that's something you have to get in your head if you want to keep long-term projects going. Because I was on such a roll. I was getting really good with this. I started typing it out. Everything was going great. And then this year happened. And while it was stressful for me, it's still technically going. You know, for my friends and my colleagues, it has been very hard on all of them. And I didn't want to be selfish and push them for things because I think that's wrong. Because when I was in hard spots, I was very lucky that people didn't push me when I needed that space, you know? And it can get a little demotivating. You could be on a roll and then be stopped dead in your tracks and not want to touch it for a while. But then think in the same boat. Well, you're not really making money off of it right now, so what's the harm in taking a while? What's the harm in taking a break? What's the harm in breathing, going back, changing things, fixing it until you enjoy the product you have made? And I think that's what helps keep long-term projects going and helps keep us fall in depth with our characters. You know, there are even some fan characters and fan OCs that I know that people are very, very emotionally attached to. And that's fine. You should be allowed to be emotionally attached to that. You should be allowed to get commissions of your fan characters and enjoy them. You know, to write fan fiction about them, to have maybe even other people write fan fiction about them. Who knows? But as long as it brings you joy in these hobbies and long-term projects, that's all that matters, and that's the bottom line here. And that was the point of this little rambles here. Well, I slapped it to some, I believe I did it to a Ticks and Turns bio, actually. And if I did do it to the bio, which, yes, no, I did, I'm remembering now. I'll have info on the character in the description down below for DeviantArt if you want to read about her. She's one of the main characters of the story. But I just felt that it felt more fitting working on a character bio while I'm talking about something like this. And you guys are listening to the magical cars in the background, so I'll leave it here. And all my other social medias are in my Linktree bio down below. I make a new video every Wednesday. And as always, guys, I will see you next time. Bye.